It's the 14th of September, 2015. Sergeant Couturas is interviewing an inmate involved in a 1010 on Tier 3G. What's your name? Kwame Wilson. What's your ID number? 2013122244144. What happened on 3G? I was standing by the phones and then this guy, I don't know him, I don't know where he came from, I don't know who he is. He got off the table and took his shirt off, unbuttoned his jumpsuit, and stepped to me and just got in like fighting position. I thought he was playing. I didn't know if he was for real or what. I don't know him. I never seen him before. But this wasn't the whole story. What the official report didn't say, what the corrections officers whispered about in break rooms, was what happened before that fight. In the showers. Where Kwame Wilson, aspiring rapper, social media celebrity, the man who threw cash to screaming fans just months earlier, was held down by multiple inmates. Where he was violated in ways that make even hardened criminals look away. Where he was stabbed repeatedly while defenseless, naked and alone. The prison code has its own justice system. And for the crime of matricide, murdering your own mother, that justice is brutal. Let's rewind. Just 3 years earlier, this same man stood in a parking lot surrounded by cheering strangers. Stacks of $100 bills in his hands. Tossing them into the air like confetti while people scrambled at his feet. You know what, you can leave. About to go get this $1,000 out for the fans, man. Really, I'm going to take out 20,000, man, just to show people, you feel me? I'm on a whole different level with this, man. I take this serious, man, so you can't put me in the same category as the others. The camera loved him. The crowd loved him. Young QC, the rapper who finally made it. Designer clothes, custom Mustang with gull wing doors, gold chains that caught the light just right. He looked like success. He looked like he'd earned every dollar. But he hadn't earned a single cent. That money? It came from his mother's bank account. And his mother? She'd been dead for exactly 7 days. This wasn't just any rapper behind bars for a crime gone wrong. This was Kwame Wilson, the man who paid $3,500 to have his own mother executed while she slept in her bed. The man who called the hitman mid-murder to say, "Make sure that bitch is dead." The man who then drained $70,000 from her accounts before her body was even cold. But here's what makes this case even more disturbing. Kwame's father, Jeffrey Todd Wilson, is currently serving life in Statesville Correctional Center for setting an apartment building on fire in 1990, killing 2 people over a street tax dispute. A family tree where both father and son are serving life sentences for murder. Where violence isn't learned, it's inherited. Where the son who was supposed to break the cycle became something worse than his father ever was. Because at least Jeffrey Todd Wilson never killed family. Before we go any further, I need to say something. Yolanda Holmes will never see another sunrise. She'll never style another client's hair at her salon. She'll never laugh with her friends or feel safe in her own home again. She died in the most horrific way possible, betrayed by the person she loved most in this world. But her story can still matter. If you think what happened to her deserves to be remembered, if you believe her life had value beyond being a walking ATM for her son, then hit that subscribe button right now. It's free. It takes 1 second. And if you don't, I genuinely want to know why in the comments. What makes a mother's murder worth 25 minutes of your time but not worth 2 seconds to click a button? I'm serious. Tell me. Because I don't understand how you can care enough to watch but not enough to subscribe. Oh wait. Yolanda Holmes stood exactly 5 feet tall, but everyone in Chicago's uptown neighborhood knew her presence filled every room she entered. At 45 years old, she'd built something real. Nappy Heads, her hair salon on North Broadway, wasn't just a business. It was where the community gathered, where stories were shared, where single mothers brought their kids knowing Yolanda would slip them a few extra dollars if they needed it. Every August, she'd throw massive back-to-school parties, handing out supplies to children who weren't even her clients. Backpacks, pencils, notebooks, all paid from her own pocket. Her nickname was Shorty, and she wore it with pride. Her clients didn't just come for haircuts, they came because Yolanda made you feel like family the second you walked through her door. She'd been doing hair for over 15 years, building her reputation one satisfied customer at a time. Her co-workers at the salon, like Ayanna Anderson, would later tell reporters that Yolanda had this gift. She could read people. She knew when you were hurting, when you needed to talk, when you just needed silence and steady hands braiding your hair. She was the kind of woman who showed up. For everyone. Especially for her son. Kwame Wilson grew up visiting his father behind prison walls. Jeffrey Todd Wilson wasn't just absent, he was infamous. A reputed West Side gang leader who'd been locked up since 1993, serving life without parole at Statesville Correctional Center in Crest Hill, Illinois. The crime? Arson. Double homicide. All over money. In 1990, Jeffrey set fire to an apartment building because the crack dealer who ran the operation refused to pay street tax. $500 to $1,000 a month. That's all it would have cost to stay alive. 2 low-level workers burned to death because their boss wouldn't pay up. Jeffrey Todd Wilson showed no remorse at trial. He was a gangster through and through, and prison was just an occupational hazard. Yolanda knew exactly what her son's father was. She'd seen that life up close, seen how it destroyed everything it touched. So she made a promise to herself and to Kwame. He would never end up like his father. She would give him everything, every opportunity, every advantage she never had. She would love him so completely that the streets could never compete. She would break the generational curse. What she didn't realize was that she wasn't raising a gangster. She was raising something worse. Someone who understood love only as transaction, loyalty only as leverage. Whatever Kwame wanted, Yolanda provided. A custom Ford Mustang with gull-wing doors that cost more than most people's annual salary? Done. Designer clothes from brands she'd never heard of? Bought. Gold chains, expensive sneakers, $1,500 puppies? All of it. When he got arrested for waving around a BB gun as a teenager, she hired an attorney to make the charges disappear. When he couldn't keep a job, she got him work through her salon connections. When he wanted to pursue a rap career as young QC, she supported that too, even though the music was going nowhere. She tattooed his name on her body. He tattooed hers on his shoulder. To the outside world they looked inseparable. Mother and son bonded by ink and blood. But Kwame saw those tattoos differently. To him, her name on his skin wasn't devotion. It was ownership. A reminder of who funded his lifestyle. A brand he'd eventually want removed. Young QC's rap career was dying before it ever lived. His YouTube videos got modest views, his shows drew small crowds, and his lyrics couldn't compete in Chicago's brutal hip-hop scene. But on social media he projected something different. Wealth, success, power he didn't actually have. Until suddenly he did. September 1st, 2012. Yolanda Holmes finished her shift at Nappy Heads and drove home to her apartment in the Wilson Yard complex. It was a Saturday night and she was tired but content. Around 11:40 p.m. her phone rang. It was Kwame. "Mom, I'm coming over to see you. I'll be there soon." She smiled. Her son wanted to visit. Of course she'd wait up for him. She unlocked her apartment door and left it that way. Why wouldn't she? This was her baby, her only child, the person she trusted more than anyone on earth. She changed into her nightclothes, settled into bed next to her boyfriend Curtis Wyatt and waited. The hours ticked by. Midnight passed. 1 a.m. 2 a.m. 3 a.m. Kwame never showed up. But someone else did. And that unlocked door, left open out of pure maternal love and trust, became the entrance to her execution. 4:32 a.m. Surveillance cameras at the Wilson Yard apartment complex captured a man entering through the main doors. He wore a dark hoodie, carried clothes on a hanger, and held a bottle of laundry detergent under his arm. He looked like any other resident heading to do laundry at an unreasonable hour. He punched in the building access code without hesitation. Someone had given him that code. Someone who lived there. His name was Eugene Spencer. 22 years old, criminal record already thick with violence. He made his way to Yolanda's floor, walked down the hallway and found her door exactly as promised. Unlocked. He stepped inside the dark apartment, moving through the living room toward the bedroom where Yolanda slept peacefully next to Curtis. Spencer raised his gun. Aimed at the sleeping woman who'd never done anything to him, who didn't even know his name. And fired. The sound exploded through the apartment. Yolanda's head snapped back, blood spreading across her pillow before she even had a chance to open her eyes. Curtis jolted awake, disoriented and terrified. He lunged at Spencer, trying to fight him off, trying to protect the woman he loved. Spencer pistol whipped him, struck him repeatedly until Curtis collapsed unconscious on the floor. Then Spencer's phone rang. He answered it while standing over Yolanda's bleeding body. The voice on the other end was calm, businesslike. "Make sure that bitch is dead." Spencer looked down at Yolanda. She was still breathing, still clinging to life despite the gunshot wound to her head. So he pulled out a knife. He stabbed her once. Twice. Making absolutely certain. The entire attack from entry to exit took 14 minutes. At 4:46 a.m., surveillance cameras captured the same man leaving the building. But now he wore a different hoodie. The one he'd arrived in was soaked with Yolanda Holmes's blood, stuffed into a bag he'd carry out later. He walked past a resident in the lobby, nodded casually, and disappeared into the early morning darkness. Curtis Wyatt woke up hours later, his head pounding, his vision blurred. He stumbled to the bedroom and found Yolanda's body. The woman who'd fallen asleep next to him was gone, replaced by a crime scene so brutal that even responding officers had to step outside to collect themselves. No forced entry. Nothing stolen. This wasn't a robbery. This was personal. Kwame arrived at the apartment later that day, playing the devastated son perfectly. He collapsed in front of family members, tears streaming down his face. How could this happen? Who would do this to his mother? His cousin held him while he sobbed. Everyone thought it was grief. It was guilt dressed up as mourning. September 9, 2012. Yolanda's funeral. The Greater Harvest Baptist Church overflowed with mourners. Detectives Michelle Wood and John Corrales caught the case on September 2, 2012, and immediately knew something wasn't right. The crime scene told a story that didn't match a random home invasion. Nothing was stolen. Yolanda's purse sat untouched on the kitchen counter, wallet full of cash and credit cards. Her jewelry was still on the dresser. The television, laptop, and other valuables remained exactly where they'd always been. But someone had known the building access code. Someone had known which apartment was hers. Someone had walked straight to her bedroom in complete darkness without stumbling or searching. Curtis Wyatt's statement added another piece. The attacker hadn't said a word, hadn't demanded anything, hadn't hesitated. He came to kill, not to rob. This was a hit. Professional. Planned. And that meant someone close to Yolanda had set it up. The community was growing frustrated. Yolanda's sister, Eunice Holmes, told reporters that police weren't doing enough. Stylists at Nappy Heads complained that detectives had only visited the salon once. But Wood and Corrales were working quietly, building a case that wouldn't fall apart in court. The breakthrough came from something Yolanda's family didn't even know existed. She had 2 cell phones registered under her name. Her primary phone showed exactly what you'd expect. Calls to clients, calls to her sister, calls to Curtis, business as usual. But the second phone? That told a completely different story. Yolanda had given that phone to Kwame as a gift, another way to keep him connected and safe. She paid the bill every month without question. What she didn't know was that her son was using it to plan her murder. The call logs were damning. In the days leading up to September 2nd, that phone had been in constant contact with a number registered to Eugene Spencer. Dozens of calls. Text messages that included phrases like handling business and make sure it's done right. Then there was the timeline. On September 1st at 11:40 p.m., Kwame called Yolanda from that phone. "Mom, I'm coming over." 40 minutes later, at 12:20 a.m., he called Eugene Spencer. The call lasted 7 minutes. At 3:58 a.m., 34 minutes before Spencer entered the building, another call to Spencer. 6 minutes. At 4:17 a.m. during the murder, another call. This one lasted 90 seconds. "Make sure that bitch is dead." Cell tower data placed Spencer's phone near the Wilson Yard complex during the entire attack. It placed Kwame's phone on the south side, far from the scene but close enough to coordinate. Detectives spent over a year building an airtight case. They tracked down Eugene Spencer's associates, pulled surveillance from every camera within 5 blocks, and interviewed dozens of witnesses. On December 22, 2013, they arrested Kwame Wilson at his apartment in North Austin. He was wearing a gold chain that cost more than his mother's funeral. The next day, December 23, they picked up Eugene Spencer and Lorana Johnson, Kwame's girlfriend who'd driven Spencer to and from the murder scene. Spencer cracked during interrogation almost immediately. He admitted everything. Yes, Kwame hired him. Yes, he was promised $3,500, though he claimed he only received $70. Yes, Kwame called during the attack to make sure Yolanda was dead. And yes, he went back into that bedroom and stabbed her while she was already dying just because Kwame told him to. Detective Wood sat across from Kwame during his interrogation, her face a mask of controlled rage. "What's wrong with you? Seriously, what's wrong with you?" He leaned back in his chair, unbothered. "It was supposed to be a robbery." That's all he'd say. It was supposed to be a robbery. 7 years after Yolanda Holmes bled out in her own bed, her killers finally faced justice. Cook County's George Layton Criminal Courthouse became ground zero for a trial that had Chicago holding its breath. Judge Stanley Sachs presided over courtroom proceedings that were unusual in their structure. Kwame Wilson and Eugene Spencer were tried simultaneously but before separate juries, a legal strategy designed to prevent one defendant's testimony from contaminating the other's case. Yolanda's family filled the gallery every single day. Her sister Eunice Holmes sat in the front row, directly behind the prosecution table. Her aunt Sandra Jackson never missed a session. They wanted Kwame to see them, to be reminded every moment of who he'd destroyed. Assistant State's Attorney Moira White opened with a statement so simple it hit like a hammer. Whatever he wanted, his mother gave to him. A car. A job. Designer clothes. Money. Love. And when it still wasn't enough, he gave her a bullet to the head while she slept. The courtroom went silent. White methodically built a timeline that left no room for doubt. Phone records displayed on screens showed every call between Kwame and Spencer in the days before the murder. September 1st, 11:40 p.m. Kwame to Yolanda. I'm coming over, Mom. September 2nd, 12:20 a.m. Kwame to Spencer. 7-minute call. September 2nd, 3:58 a.m. Kwame to Spencer. 6-minute call. September 2nd, 4:17 a.m. During the actual murder, Kwame to Spencer. 90 seconds. Make sure that bitch is dead. Surveillance footage played on a loop. Spencer entering at 4:32 a.m. with his props, the detergent and clothes making him look like a harmless resident. Spencer exiting at 4:46 a.m. in a different hoodie, the first one now soaked in blood. Curtis Wyatt took the stand, his voice shaking as he described waking to gunfire, seeing Yolanda's head snap back, fighting a man who seemed determined to kill them both. Then came the evidence that made even hardened court reporters look away. Bank records showing Kwame withdrew $68,000 in the 3 months after his mother's death. Receipts for custom car modifications. Gull wing doors installed on the Mustang Yolanda had bought him. $10,000. Gold chains. Designer shopping sprees. $1,500 puppies. And then the YouTube video. Kwame standing in a parking lot, surrounded by screaming fans, throwing $100 bills into the air like he was a rap superstar. I don't play no games, man. I do this for real. The date stamp on the video? September 9th, 2012. The same day as Yolanda's funeral. Kwame's attorney, Stephen Richards, tried everything. He claimed the confession was coerced, that detectives fed his client details about the crime. He argued that Kwame genuinely believed Spencer was only going to rob Yolanda, not kill her. He pointed to Curtis Wyatt's failed polygraph from 2012, suggesting maybe Curtis was somehow involved. Every argument fell flat. Spencer's lawyer, Michael McHale, took a different approach. He painted his client as a pawn manipulated by a master. Kwame promised him money he never fully paid. Kwame made the calls. Kwame gave the orders. Spencer was just following instructions. But that defense only proved premeditation. It didn't create innocence, it just spread the guilt around. March 5, 2019. Kwame's jury deliberated for 2 hours and 11 minutes. Guilty. First-degree murder. Guilty. Attempted murder of Curtis Wyatt. Guilty. Home invasion. March 6, 2019. Spencer's jury took longer, nearly 12 hours over 2 days, but returned the same verdicts. Guilty on every count. Yolanda's family wept in the gallery, not from sadness but from relief that finally justice was coming. Judge Stanley Sachs had presided over hundreds of murder cases in his career, but even he seemed shaken as he prepared to deliver sentences. He looked directly at Kwame Wilson, sitting at the defense table with the same blank expression he'd worn throughout the trial. The judge's voice was steady but his words cut like knives. The word is matricide. The murder of one's own mother. Whatever he wanted, his mother gave to him. A car. A job. Fancy clothes. One could say he was spoiled. She gave Kwame life and it was his choice to take it away from her. The courtroom was absolutely silent except for quiet sobbing from Yolanda's family. Kwame Wilson, you are hereby sentenced to 99 years in the Illinois Department of Corrections. 45 years for the first-degree murder of Yolanda Holmes. 25 years for the attempted murder of Curtis Wyatt. 29 years for home invasion. These sentences are to run consecutively, not concurrently. You will die in prison. Eugene Spencer received 100 years. His projected parole date, according to Illinois Department of Corrections records, is March 22, 2080. He'll be 102 years old. The judge asked if Kwame wanted to make a statement before being taken into custody. He stood slowly, that same blank expression never changing. His voice was flat, emotionless, like he was reading from a script he didn't believe. I just want to say nobody loved my mother more than me. The audacity of those words hung in the air. Yolanda's name was still tattooed across his shoulder, visible beneath his jail uniform. Her sister Eunice stood up and screamed at him from the gallery before bailiffs could escort her out. Rewind to 4 years before sentencing. Kwame was being held at Cook County Jail while awaiting trial, housed on Tier 3G with dozens of other inmates. Prison has its own moral code, its own hierarchy of acceptable crimes. Drug dealers get respect. Armed robbers get respect. Even some killers get respect depending on the circumstances. But men who hurt children or kill their mothers, they get something else entirely. Kwame was standing by the payphones one afternoon when an inmate he'd never seen before got up from a table. The man slowly removed the top half of his jumpsuit, letting it hang at his waist. He walked directly toward Kwame and assumed a fighting stance. Kwame thought it was a joke at first. He didn't know this guy. They'd never had words, never had conflict. Why would he want to fight? Then the first punch landed. Other inmates formed a loose circle, not to watch but to block the guard's view. Someone tried to break it up briefly. The moment passed. Then it started again, more violent this time. Kwame tried to defend himself, tried to hold the attacker off until corrections officers arrived. They did, eventually. They wrote up the incident as a standard tier altercation. Case closed. But that wasn't the incident that really mattered. The one that made news, the one whispered about in legal circles and prison rights advocacy groups, happened in the showers. Multiple inmates cornered Kwame when he was at his most vulnerable. Completely naked. No guards nearby. No cameras recording. What happened next, the prison records call it an assault. Street terminology is more explicit. He was wetted. Gang raped by multiple men while others stood watch. Then came the stabbing. Multiple wounds across his torso and back. Not deep enough to kill, but deep enough to send a message. You're not safe here. You'll never be safe here. He survived, required medical attention, spent time in the prison infirmary. The official incident report mentions a fight and injuries. It doesn't mention the sexual assault. Those details came from other sources, from inmates who talked to reporters, from correctional officers who spoke anonymously. Why was he targeted? In prison, even murderers have mothers. Even gang members who've killed dozens of people draw a line at matricide. Killing the woman who gave birth to you, who raised you, who loved you unconditionally. That's not just crime. That's betrayal of the most fundamental human bond. And in a place where most men will never hug their mothers again, where phone calls home are precious and limited, Kwame represented something they couldn't forgive. He had access to his mother and chose murder. They would have given anything for one more conversation with theirs. Yolanda Holmes made a critical mistake that thousands of loving parents make every single day. She confused provision with love, material gifts with emotional connection. When you grow up visiting your father in prison for double homicide, when you grow up knowing that violence is your inheritance, something inside you breaks. Kwame needed therapy, needed male mentorship, needed someone to teach him accountability and consequences. Instead, he got a Mustang. Child psychologists call it compensation parenting. Yolanda was trying to fill the void left by Jeffrey Todd Wilson's absence with things she could control. Money. Gifts. Opportunities. What she couldn't see was that she was raising a narcissist who believed the world owed him everything simply because he existed. Every time she bailed him out of trouble, every time she paid for another failed venture, every time she gave him access to her accounts, she reinforced one message. You don't have to earn anything. You don't have to work for anything. You just have to ask mom. But there's something deeper here, something that goes beyond parenting mistakes. Generational trauma doesn't just disappear because you love your child. Jeffrey Todd Wilson's violence lived in Kwame's DNA, in his understanding of how problems get solved, in his fundamental view of human life as disposable. Looking back, the red flags were everywhere. Kwame showed no genuine grief at his mother's funeral, spending most of the service outside while family members sobbed over her casket. Within days he was accessing her bank accounts. Within weeks he was flaunting wealth on social media that he'd never earned. He couldn't hold down a job despite his mother's connections. His rap career was failing, but his ego demanded he look successful anyway. Friends and family explained away his behavior. He's in shock. He's processing grief differently. Everyone grieves in their own way. But grief doesn't look like customizing your car with gull-wing doors 7 days after your mother's murder. Grief doesn't look like throwing cash to strangers at a parking lot while your mother's body is barely cold in the ground. That wasn't grief. That was celebration. Could Yolanda Holmes still be alive today? Yes. Absolutely yes. If she'd recognized that children of incarcerated parents need professional mental health intervention, not just financial support. If she'd understood that access to money without teaching financial responsibility creates entitlement, not gratitude. If she'd set firm boundaries and enforced real consequences when Kwame got in trouble instead of hiring lawyers to make problems disappear. If the community had programs specifically designed for young men growing up in the shadow of violent fathers. If schools screened for narcissistic personality traits and intervened early. If anyone had told Yolanda that love sometimes means saying no. But here's the hardest truth. Sometimes you can do everything right and still lose. Sometimes the damage runs so deep that no amount of love can fix it. Yolanda gave her son every advantage, every opportunity, and he still chose murder. Because at the end of the day, Kwame Wilson made a choice. He could have gotten a job. He could have built his own career. He could have asked his mother for help one more time. Instead, he chose $3,500 and a hitman. That's not mental illness. That's not trauma. That's evil. Yolanda Holmes spent 45 years on this earth. She worked doubles at Nappy Head's salon so her son would never go without. She threw parties for neighborhood kids who weren't even hers. She tattooed her son's name on her body because she loved him that much. And he repaid her with a bullet to the head while she slept. Then he threw her money in the air for strangers to fight over while recording it for YouTube clout. This video took days of research, hours of writing, careful editing to tell Yolanda's story with the respect she deserves. If her story mattered enough for you to watch this far, if you believe a murdered mother deserves to be remembered as more than just a headline, then subscribing costs you absolutely nothing. 1 click. 2 seconds. That's it. It tells the algorithm that cases like this matter, that victims' stories deserve to be heard. But here's what I find fascinating. Some of you won't subscribe. You'll watch 25 minutes of a woman being betrayed by her own son, you'll hear how she was shot in her sleep and stabbed to make sure she was dead, and then you'll scroll away without hitting that button. So I genuinely want to hear from you in the comments. I'm not being sarcastic. I actually want to understand. Why not? What makes her story worth your time but not worth a free subscription? What's the line for you? Because I'm trying to figure out the psychology here and I can't. For everyone who did subscribe, thank you. You're helping make sure Yolanda Holmes isn't forgotten. Drop a comment and tell me what you think could have saved this family. What warning signs would you have caught? And if you're still reading this, still on the fence about subscribing, still thinking about clicking away, just know that your choice says something. I'm not sure what yet, but something. See you in the next case. Or not. Up to you.